There are many ways to be an artist in this world. This evening, I have the opportunity to share with you what inspires me to create. My interest in the human body stems from my personal experiences, primarily those related to times of struggle. Although my creative work is introspective, I explore our vulnerability as human beings to heighten awareness of others and to initiate questions surrounding healthcare. I do so by focusing on basic, significant aspects of being human, such as emotions, spirituality, healing, and empathy. Seeing the limitations of the body, as well as the resiliency of the human spirit, I create work that addresses the emotional and physical complexities therein. I hate myself for that dream, or should I say nightmare? How could I think something like that? To this day, I feel guilty about my unconscious mind. I don't know if she could survive alone. They had been together over 50 years. He looked good just 6 months ago, back to the man we all remembered, telling those tall tales of his years of running the trains back and forth between Detroit and Chicago. I keenly remember that one involving the mafia. I imagine him at the front of the train in his engineer cap, cars full of men wearing the finest three-piece suits, sipping whiskey and smoking cigars. At the time, I was optimistic, perhaps naive, about the truth of his illness. The hospital room was crowded. We sat watching nurses enter and leave in an endless rotation. He lost so much weight. His physique had once matched his bold tales. Now this man of great stature is small and quiet. I hated seeing him like this. He wasn't the man I knew, and I worried this is the man I'll remember. That night, I dreamt I suffocated him. A week later, he died. During graduate school, my creative practice evolved from jewelry and metals to that of sculptural work as a result of my research and personal experiences. Drawing inspiration from medicine, theology, and psychology, I created the Sarcine de Corpus series. Sarcine de Corpus, Latin for baggage of the body, is a series of work that focuses on the effects of illness and disease on the body, spirit, and community. The pieces are a cross between medical displays and a woman's handbag, an object that contains private and personal items. Referencing handbags, my objects contain one's private experience with illness. Likewise, the object suggests the baggage of illness felt by the entire community. Another important element in this work is my use of anatomical imagery to represent the body. The use of anatomical imagery is derived from early medical illustration. Dating back to the Age of Enlightenment, the desire to unveil the mysteries of the human body led to an explosion in anatomical studies and medical illustration. This popularity resulted in anatomical imagery being used outside the medical field and has been used by artists to explore issues surrounding the body. Within these works, the anatomical forms I create depict a specific region of the body affected by illness and disease. I also use anatomical forms as a way to comment on the medical world. I have often witnessed care that focuses on the illness instead of focusing on the whole person. In these works, I rely on my craft skills to construct the pieces. Working from quick sketches, I dive into material studies to explore the possibility of that material. While I alter and transform a material, I often analyze various design decisions. The completed series are ambiguous in relation to time and place, to pique the viewer's curiosity and promote a desire to further investigate the work and its meaning. In 2005, I created the Aortic Series in response to my frustration that I observed by doctors for being just not, I'm sorry, I lost my place, frustration for their poor care, and really from my experience, the care of treating again the person as a specimen and not thinking about them as an entire human being. Building off of the previous series, I created anatomical forms out of felt and wax to represent the body as a specimen to be examined. In the pieces, I contained representations of internal organs in compartments for viewing, storing, and transporting. Similar to specimens, they are numbered and labeled for identification purposes. Purposely vague as to why the bodily forms are placed in the containers, the pieces enable the viewers to contemplate the narrative and therefore reflect on the treatment of the body in the medical world. She calls while I'm in class. I know something is wrong. I can hear it in her voice. She is scared. She is in pain, a pain that I can't understand or even imagine. I drive on autopilot to get there. I have been here before numerous times as a child and now as an adult. I remember this doctor's office. Its windows overlooking the parking lot, the single file row of chairs, the sliding frosted glass nurse's window. The elevator, with its over-the-top brass embellishments, moves at a snail's pace, as if she wants me to enjoy her grandeur. As each floor passes, my anxiety builds. I try to push it down, control it. I have to pull it together for her, for us. I push it down just enough for frustration to surface. I'm angry, pissed off that this is happening again. This is This disease is like a marathon. It takes endurance and strength, and the run is becoming harder and harder. 12th floor. The elevator door opens and I rush out, only to hesitate at the office door. My heart is racing. I'm scared to see her suffer. I close my eyes and pray. Recognized as a form of complementary medicine, prayer is able to calm, comfort, and aid the human spirit during times of suffering. Within my work, I continue to rely on anatomical imagery. And in addition to its association with the medical world, anatomical imagery is found in Christian votives and relics dating back to the 15th century. Used as prayer offerings for healing, wax became the primary material for creating these votives, for its ability to mimic the visceral quality of the body. In addition to replicating the body, wax has also been used to preserve sacred relics. Here, the incorrupt body of Saint Bernadette has been sealed in a layer of wax. In this piece, I create my own wax representation of a brain encased in a rich suede and metal container, reminiscent of religious artifacts I have seen. Intertwining scientific and religious concepts of healing, the piece is seen both as a religious artifact and a medical device. The interior of the form opens to reveal medical instrumentation, further questioning the intent. Here, the delicate instruments represent the notion of pain, as well as the potential for healing. Further blurring science and theology, the second piece in the series incorporates a modern, sterile plastic display case to hold its contents. Contents that include a plastic rosary tucked between the brain's hemispheres. "3 a.m. in the Osaka airport, tired, cranky. An American couple sparks up a conversation with me. At this point in my life, I loathe the sight of young couples. I envy their happiness, their togetherness. Did you get your currency? Did you set up your transport to the hotel? It'll be really late when we get in. Don't take the taxis." I didn't do any of this. The truth is, I didn't want to worry about the details. I didn't care. This trip was an escape to get far away from my mistakes. Somehow, over the past few months, I've managed to lose my confidence, my spirit, myself, replacing it only with the failures that tease me relentlessly. So I decided to run away from it all. I long to breathe without worry, to taste new things, and to be curious once more. Somewhere along that trip, between wandering streets filled with eye-popping neon signs, to praying at a temple dotted with origami paper bells, I started to feel content, perhaps even a bit carefree for the first time in months. There, in the heart of another world, I took the first step in my journey back to finding myself, to living again. Drawing inspiration from literature, the metaphor continues to be an essential element within my work. I rely on the metaphor to express difficult emotions associated with depression. In this piece, titled She Feels, a hinged box with an image of a brain rests in the center of pages from a diagnostic manual for mental illness. Inside the box, small light bulbs are wrapped in steel wire, implying that the light is there but just can't escape. A feeling that the textbooks or manuals cannot capture. Titled Rumination, the interior of this piece contains a paper cone of ruminating thought. Negative thoughts that spin you deeper and deeper into darkness, contained next to a glass syringe packed with the estimated number of Americans with depression. At this time, a staggering 18 million. Today, closer to 20. As a maker, I find comfort and ease in repetitive and laborious processes. Artist Cornelia Parker refers to the repetition of laborious acts as her personal mantra, used for understanding something. Likewise, working in this manner enables me to process my thoughts and emotions. When considering how to convey anxiety in a sculptural format, I turned to this process as well as referred back to the concept of the anatomical votive. To create this piece, I burnt the image of a brain into 100 pieces of paper. As I slowly burnt lines into the paper, the act of mark-making absorbed my anxiety and enabled my mind to become quiet. Continuing to explore the use of ritual to cope with anxiety and to address feelings and emotions often dismissed or ignored by society, mental exhaustion is constructed from hundreds of pieces of paper, burnt with a scalding hot drain and sealed in handmade vellum envelopes. Continuing to the emotionally charged residue, neatly contained, but still transparent. In this piece, I was thinking of how, although we try to hide depression or our emotions, it's still transparent in our lives. We might try to contain it in as many ways as possible, but is there. Whatever you do, do not cry. Do not cry this time, be strong. Despite the repetition of my mantra, I feel water starting to fill up the corners of my eyes. Quickly, I take a deep breath, hoping the tears will get sucked right back up into my eyeballs. The IV burns my hand. My feet are terribly cold, in spite of the ugly slipper socks the nurse makes me wear. And being strong has turned into a pair of steady streams running down my cheeks. Embarrassed, I tried to hide the tears, wiping them away as nonchalantly as possible. But the quickened beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor gives away my secret. I am waiting to be rolled into surgery to find out if I have cancer, breast cancer. And I'm worried about appearing weak, being vulnerable. It's okay to cry, but no one tells me that, not even me. Within the Vulnerable series, I created abstract human figures that I then posed and photographed in various gestures to convey emotions, intimacy, and vulnerability we share as human beings. Thinking of how to create three-dimensional figures that were representations of the human form without having to address notions of identity or gender, I turned to a lace-making technique called crocheting to create flexible sculptures out of steel wire. Crocheting, the process of using a hook needle to pull loops from a continuous thread and working with but one stitch at a time, also serves as a physical connection to my family heritage. Like most domestic crafts, crocheting has been passed down to me from my mother and reminds me of the generations of women before me. Dating back to the 16th century, the art of crochet was refined by cloistered nuns throughout Europe. Referred to as nun's thread, crocheted pieces became popular amongst the public, especially due to Queen Victoria's love of the craft. In my research, I found a passage that talked about how Queen Victoria used crocheting to cope with her grief after the death of her husband, Albert. Here is an image of the Queen crocheting, taken in 1889. In addition to my personal connection with the craft, I used the technique to create interwoven forms that are structurally strong, yet visually and physically light. After 16 months of crocheting, I completed 4 figures to start photographing in various gestures and poses. Photographing the figures enabled me to show them in several different poses and opened my eyes to the potential of the objects to create images. Knowing I had one day for the photo session, due to a rental of a very, very expensive camera, more expensive than my car, I worked for several months experimenting with poses to capture emotive gestures I wanted to portray. Playing off of the lightness and color of the stitched wire, the figures in the series allude to ethereal silhouettes that evoke associations with ghosts or shadows. When I started to photograph the work, I noticed something in the images that I never saw before. The lines of the stitches created indentations mimicking collarbones, shoulders, and subtle creases in the skin. The rental of that expensive digital camera enabled me to capture the detail of the wire, so when viewed close, you start to understand that these are three-dimensional objects, but when viewed afar, they become drawings in space. The final images are large format prints that maintain the figure's size to strengthen the viewer's association with them as fellow human beings. The completed series emphasizes or reminds us of the need we still have to be connected to our emotions and to each other. Building off of the Vulnerable series, I continue to contemplate how our bodies are able to express emotion. Focusing on the sense of touch our hands are capable of, I replicated my own hands and crocheted steel wire. Crocheting the hands out of steel wire, I juxtaposed the delicacy of this traditional lace-making technique with the strength of steel to represent the range of emotions our hands express, from a gentle touch to a strong grasp. As I was working with the hands, I started to think of them as puppets versus sculptures, enabling me to freely experiment with them in a variety of ways. It is much easier for me to create three-dimensional form than two-dimensional imagery. So I rely on the 3D to inform the 2D. Perhaps a backwards process, but one that suits how I think. From the conception of the project, I knew I would need to give myself plenty of time to create a vast selection of images. Similar to the figures, it took months of experimental image making and select editing. Although a lengthy process, it was important for me to not limit myself. I need to explore their potential, as well as my potential as an artist. The stories I shared this evening enable me to recognize my emotions and make peace with them. Although my stories were struggles I faced, they also tell of the resiliency of the human spirit. In his book, Anthropologists on Mars, neurologist and author Oliver Sacks describes stories of individuals living with some of the most challenging neurological disorders as tales of survival, survival under altered conditions, survival made possible by the wonderful powers of reconstruction and adaptation we have. In this series of digital images titled Adapt, I focus on how we attempt to repair, alter, and transform our bodies. Mimicking wire mesh used in reconstructive surgery, I crocheted fine stainless wire structures to serve as extensions of the ambiguous anatomical forms, fabricated from my felt and wax technique. My wire forms suggest the body's ability to grow with and incorporate these artificial structures, alluding to the capacity for adapting and healing. The next series of images continues this investigation. Here I removed all the object's color to create a sterile, X-ray-like representation, further stressing the strides in medical technology, as well as the body's ability to transform and heal. Seeing a new perspective is both enlightening as well as a bit scary. It challenges you to expand your vision and pushes you out of your comfort zone. In the summer of 2009, I was an artist in residence in Sydney, Australia. Taking with me a spool of steel wire, a crochet hook, and my digital camera, I set out to experience something new. This time, my urge to leave wasn't one of wanting to run away. This time, I wanted to be by myself and become absorbed into my work. While in Sydney, I connected to an island off the Sydney harbor called Cockatoo Island. The island, once the largest shipbuilding yard in Australia, is home to abandoned cranes and machinery from its heyday. Silenced by time, the industrial machines are hauntingly beautiful. Contemplating the theme of place for a proposal to the Powerhouse Museum of Science and Design, also in Sydney, I continued to think about the island's lost and realized I needed to focus on my own roots, Detroit. Witnessing the rise and fall of the auto capital of the world, my family is known as a car family, supported by the industry for over 70 years. While thinking about how to portray my relationship to Detroit, I visited the Henry Ford Museum and came across this engine from the Model N. In 1906, the Model N housed the first four-cylinder engine and sparked a split between Henry Ford and Alexander Malcolmson. Shortly afterwards, Ford went on to create the assembly line for the Model T. Deciding to replicate this engine in crocheted steel and copper wire, I'm paying homage to my connection to Detroit in the auto industry. This is one of the sketches I used to figure out how to make this piece. Likewise, there is something rather appealing to me to create an engine out of steel lace. By doing so, I reflect on the stories and memories of Clara Falski. In 1902, Clara was born in Detroit to immigrant parents from Poland. My great-grandmother was a skilled housewife that made intricate blankets and delicious Polish delicacies. Her service to her family expanded to that of the US government. During World War II, she became a highly skilled craftsman, aiding the war effort by assembling secret military parts. Working alone in a telephone-sized booth, she put together parts for hours and hours on end. Never knowing what she was fabricating, her work was precise and quick. My great-grandmother was one of the many skilled women working in Detroit to support the country. Similar to the figures, the crocheting process to create the engine was a laborious one. Within the past 4 months, I devised a strict schedule to complete the piece. As my daily routine became accustomed to the integration of this labor, I noticed I started to crave it more and more. Over time, my movements became ingrained, subtle, exact. My hands mimicking a machine's precision. Crocheting yarn is challenging. Crocheting wire is extremely difficult work. The mastery of the stitch is crucial to my work, for it demonstrates my deep appreciation and commitment to this traditional domestic craft, as well as my desire to elevate the skill beyond simple women's work to that of fine art. The stitch also served as my guide to create this challenging piece. In his book, The Hand, author Frank Wilson suggests that the hand is essential to learning. Through my hands, I was able to understand the tension and strength of the material, how much I could bend or manipulate the wires. Since I don't use any patterns or stencils, just images in that sketch with the measurements on it, this knowledge and the mastery of the stitch is what enabled my mind to figure out the complex construction of the parts. Oh, back. When I completed the engine, I realized this piece is more of a ghost of the original one, a memory of past greatness, a longing for those gone. My creative practice has expanded beyond solely working alone in my studio to one that encompasses community engagement work. Focusing on the role of creativity in healthcare has been a natural outgrowth of my research. My collaborative teaching efforts at U of M provide me with the opportunity to bring creativity to the community. In the winter of 2006, I developed a community engagement course in the School of Art and Design titled Retaining Identity, the Role of Creative Work in the Healthcare Setting. Research has shown that the visual arts can play a vital role in creating a healing environment for patients and their families. Art is being recognized by the hospital community for such benefits as maintenance of dignity, distraction from pain, and an aid in the grieving process. In this course, we explore creativity and the potential for art to aid the human spirit during times of illness. Working with collaborative partners, we experience firsthand how creativity is able to help retain one's sense of self. Partnering with the University of Michigan's Geriatric Center's Silver Club program, which is a day program for individuals with moderate to advanced dementia, students and I create and organize art-making workshops for the members. Working in teams, students develop project ideas, prepare the lesson plan, prep the materials, and facilitate the workshops on site. Their goal is to create a skill-based workshop geared towards adults as meaningful, educational, and enjoyable. Another important aspect to the collaboration is the intergenerational learning that takes place. Bridging the divide between generations, the students and members learn from each other. Listening to members' stories, the students experience the rich history of life, and in exchange, they bring the members a sense of empowerment and joy. Through our collaboration, we realize the value of living in the moment. Another collaborative partner I have worked with over the years is the University of Michigan Healthcare System's Gift of Art program. In 2006, we teamed up to create the Dragon of Wishes, Hopes, and Dreams. As artists in residence on the project, I worked with Gifts of Art and art and design students to create a permanent piece of artwork in collaboration with patients, visitors, and staff at the University of Michigan Hospital. Working from a design by artist Kay Cassell, my goal was to transform her black and white drawing into a 16-foot folded paper dragon composed of 1,700 scales, decorated by patients with their wishes, hopes, and dreams. To accomplish this task, hours were spent in meetings to organize the project, as well as problem solving and technical samples to create a paper dragon of this magnitude. The 1,700 scales contain amazing messages of hope for the future. Some were really heart-wrenching, about a mother that was dying and she wanted her children to be happy. And some were really humorous, like, free parking, which is a wish we all want. So once we collected these scales, we decided to fold them to maintain the individual's private message. Integrating the project into my course, the students and I worked together to create the final piece, which involved folding all those scales, creating paper origami details, and figuring out how to construct the parts. Working on a project of this magnitude, it was important for me to connect to the piece in some way. Taking the time to read the scales before folding them, as well as spending hours on countless intricate details, allowed me to have an intimate experience during this highly collaborative project. Here's the final piece. A&D alum, Bertha Chu, was one of my students that devoted a substantial amount of time to the project. She wrote to me, "The project made me keenly aware of the need and worth of art, especially art that is created for and by a community, rather than only for and by an individual." I dedicate this talk to Judith Mondro, Kenneth Mondro, Delphine Zikorsky, and in memory of Clara Felsky, Edward Zikorsky, in Isabel Mondro. Thank you for listening to my story, to what moves me to create. I like the sign.